Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Davis Spindle. Welcome to the Morning Deuce, and I hope you stuck with me for the whole week. If you did, I'm impressed. Big ups to you. You might be fighting a little hangover from your Cinco de Mayo this Friday. I hope you had a good time. If you are fighting that hangover and you haven't listened to yesterday's epic story that I told about my trip to Mexico where I saw a dead person, a.k.a. the legend of El Pollero, it's worth a listen. Today we're going to be a little heavier, so that's my warning. This is a food for thought issue that I'm going to talk about today, and the reason it's coming up, there's a couple, but one of them is I just realized that it has been a week. I missed the birthday of one of my very good friends who passed away with an addiction. He overdosed and passed away from heroin. And it's been just over 2 years since that happened, and his birthday was earlier this week and over the weekend. And it brought up as I thought about it, it brought up a really passionate issue for me. And it's something that I think a lot of people are aware of because drug addiction affects everyone in some type of way. Everybody has a friend or a family member or their own personal struggle or their own connection to it. I'm the son of a woman who was an addictions nurse for 20 years. So it's something that I've been alluded to just, in that way, and then obviously in many other ways, with what I just told you about a great friend who left a lot earlier than he should have. But heroin addiction is becoming a really, really massive problem. Heroin and opiates it's a massive, massive epidemic. And I think at times it's something that we want to ignore because it's just a difficult thing to deal with. But it's a huge problem, especially in certain regions of the country. In the Northeast in particular, it's really tough. But, we're losing some incredible people. Friends, family members. We're losing, like icons. Philip Seymour, Hoffman died of a heroin overdose. And there's a lot of evidence that says, Prince had an opioid issue. Which isn't confirmed yet, but it's becoming a really big problem. And the issue, in my opinion, as I go off here, is we have a huge problem with overprescription of painkillers, of opiates like Percocet and Vicodin. And these painkillers are so powerful and so potent, and your body becomes so addictive, and they take the place of your body's natural ability to create those chemicals that help you kill pain and those pleasure-sensing chemicals which your body is creating to balance out the pain that it's feeling as a defense mechanism. And these pills are made perfectly to create that sensation which you become addicted to once your body cannot create it. And it is a huge issue. It is a huge problem because we're overprescribing them intensely. I mean, I know when I had my wisdom teeth surgery, I was prescribed a crazy amount of painkillers that I did not even need a remote amount of. But taking them, I remember how intensely I wanted them to deal with the pain. And you very much do, and you do need them. But the amount that I was given was absolutely incredibly excessive. And the same can be said when I had a shoulder surgery. I mean, I needed them, and I needed them really bad in the beginning. But I had to wean myself off of them and was given such an incredible amount. And then you're left with unfilled prescriptions or tons of drugs that sell for a crazy amount of money. And it's a major problem. It's a major problem because people are using them recreationally. People are getting addicted to them. I know people who have had their houses broken into and prescription drugs stolen from them because the addiction and the street value is so intense. And it's a really big problem because the drugs are made with such strength and so perfectly chemically made that street versions of the opiate, like heroin, are not as clean. But because the drugs are so prevalent, the pharmaceutical drugs are so prevalent, supply and demand determines value. The cost of heroin is unbelievably cheap, incredibly cheap, and uncomfortably accessible. And what happens is someone gets hooked on an opiate addiction. These drugs are too prevalent, used recreationally, super addictive. But they're expensive habits, and when they're controlling your lives and they're hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars, people will try to get that same feeling for a cheaper way because they can't afford what they're getting before. And they turn to drugs like heroin, which are significantly less clean. They're not made in a lab. They're cut differently. You need to take a lot more to try to create that same feeling. And your risk of overdose is just significantly higher. And when you have a habit built on Vicodin and Percocet and pills that are costing you hundreds, and you can try to get that same feeling for $10, $20, you can't give up that feeling. And it's getting worse. It's getting worse because I know that there's the community that I grew up in. There's a beautiful, young, accomplished woman who fell into an addiction like this and is in such a difficult spot that her family has reached out to the community and, lost their sense of, put aside their sense of, I don't know if it's pride or shame, but they asked for help for a significant amount of money that they need because their daughter, who had everything going for them and is in her early 20s, is battling this addiction so intensely that she's basically slipping in and out of cognizance with the world, and they need the best help they can possibly get. That is what we're pushing towards in uncomfortably large amounts. It is becoming a real issue. So then the question is, we recognize the issue. Well, how do you solve the problem? And it has a lot to do with the amount of money prescription drug companies are making and the way our prescription drug market works. We talk about free market economy all the time, but the medical industry is a perfect example of not having a free market economy. You look at someone like Martin Shkreli, who is that CEO of Turning Pharmaceuticals, who you'll know if you Google him, you know who he is, and everybody hates him, and he's really has a very punchable face, and he's just a guy that nobody wants to like. He's no shame, no remorse. But he says, I'm in medical health, but I'm in business. I'm not doing my job to help people. And what he was criticized so intensely for was buying a company that provides medication for an immune disease that is often affiliated with people who have HIV and AIDS. And he bought the company and he raised the price of the pill thousands of percentages. I think the pill became like $700 from the $10 or $20 pill it was before. I'm not exactly sure the numbers, but it went skyrocketing up. Thousands of percent increase. And yes, he is not a good person, and that was not a good decision. But what is happening is it has to do with the way the market system is working. That pill is also made for dollars, like single dollars, even less, in different parts of the world, in Asia, South America, Europe, to fight that disease. But you can't go to those countries and import it. I can't go to China where they might sell that pill or a similar pill to fight the same immune disease, get it and bring it into the country. I can't order it from there because that's not allowed. And the FDA regulates very intensely with intense testing and training to give out licenses to use, for pharmacy. So when we regulate very intensely how few companies are allowed to have the license to distribute medication like this, we create our own artificial supply and demand. And medical companies have a lot of money, and they lobby really intensely to limit the amount of supply of drugs. It's a real thing. Or they regulate it really intensely, so they're overprescribing these things so people get addicted and they get more of them, and that's a real reality. Or they limit the amount of contracts so they can raise the money, because if it's a non-addictive drug, you limit the supply. If the demand is high, you can sell the pricing for more. And this is why you see scenarios where Bernie Sanders is saying the medical system is so messed up. He, as a senator from Vermont, took a busload of women across the border to Canada so that they could buy cancer medication for single-digit percentages of what their medication costs in Vermont. So their medication was hundreds of dollars in Vermont. They got on a bus, drove north, crossed the border, and got the same medication led by a U.S. senator. That's how messed up the process is. They got it for like tens of dollars. That system is a huge, huge problem. And that's probably the first thing. The first thing is figuring out a way to do this. And a pop culture way that brought a light to this issue is Dallas Buyers Club, which Matthew McConaughey, I believe, won the Best Actor for. And that was all about he had AIDS and was going through this crazy testing in medical facilities because the FDA was forcing the regulation when he knew there were other alternatives that the United States wouldn't let him take part in, and because it was illegal and it wasn't regulated and the free market didn't exist. And he went to foreign countries and literally smuggled in these drugs and medication that weren't allowed in the United States but showed significant signs of improvement, and was giving them away when you paid a subscription to be part of his club to help extend the lives of people, because the system was so bogged down medically in the government that there was no other way for people to get the medication they needed to be on the front, cutting edge of fighting this drug, because it's not a free market economy when it comes to medical prescription drugs. And there needs to be a better system for this, because we can't be prescribing copious amounts of really intense drugs that people can get addicted to, and then intensely limiting the supply of medical drugs that people need for actual diseases. They have non-addictive properties, but really high demand. We're limiting those. It's a huge, real problem. And then we need centers for people that have problems that are affordable. We need help for people that have drug addictions, that are battling drug addictions, supportive centers, rehab facilities, medical, mental, personal, all of those opportunities. And you need to create an environment where people aren't afraid to say, hey, you maybe need to make some different lifestyle choices. Some of the best people I've ever met in my life had horrible addictions with drugs and alcohol, and they turned their lives around and have become even better people because they were able to fight through that, but they had really supportive nets. Other people weren't as successful. So it starts maybe in a level where you have to think about who your representatives and lawmakers are and the choices they feel about, things like pharmaceuticals and if they're representing you. And then it starts with the decisions that you and your friends make and the way that you allow people you care about to interact with, different drugs. It's just something that is affecting too many people. I know too many people who have lost people they really loved who couldn't get away from a powerful addiction like this, and too many communities are impacted. So, that's what's on my mind today, and I know it's not the most uplifting thing to ever hear going into a Friday, but I think it's something we need to talk about. I mean, it was a huge issue in the primary elections for places like New Hampshire, Maine. Small communities in the Northeast are having a major, major problem with it. And it really is an epidemic, and the amount of overdoses is up astronomically for opiates. It is a real thing, and it's not the easiest thing to think about or talk about, but when you lose someone you care about, it becomes something that you can't ignore. And instead of the problem getting so big that it cannot be ignored, we need to recognize it now and figure out how we can make a change. So that's my part one. Part two, as we wipe it clean, is a development that's going in a really interesting and incredible direction. And that's what SpaceX is doing early this morning. They are shooting a rocket, or have shot by this point, when you're listening to this, have shot a rocket with a Japanese satellite into space, our first ever commercial space, I believe, time that a commercial space agency has flown a Japanese satellite into space. They are letting it go, and then they are attempting to catch the falling rocket on a platform floating in the ocean, which they did successfully already, but this one is moving faster with more to carry and going higher into space, and they're attempting to catch it on a barge in the middle of the ocean so that they can reuse it, as opposed to having millions of dollars worth of data and equipment lost into space or burn up in the atmosphere or destroy upon landing. It is an incredible undertaking, and it's amazing that someone even thought of that concept, let alone decided to make it happen. And I think there's a couple things we can take away from it. First, there is no dream too big, because Elon Musk has created some incredible ideas, obviously Tesla being one of them, but SpaceX is unbelievable. And to think of that concept and then to figure out a way to try to make it happen and eventually to be successful, and to take every failure as a way to continue to try to get better so that you can do something that saves incredible amounts of money and changes the face of space travel. I mean, that is a dream, and that is an incredible way of attacking it. I think that's one big thing to take away. But I think the other big thing to take away is, that's a crazy amount of change. And technology is moving so fast. And the idea that we could be launching rockets at a much more intense and faster rate as time goes on, because we can catch them and recycle them and interact more with space and learn more about the entire scope of the universe, is incredible. What an opportunity that is. So it's nuts to think about, but it's about embracing change. Technology can be scary, change can be scary, and to think about that whole expanse of the universe can be scary, but to embrace the change and to figure out a way to put yourself in a position to gain more knowledge and to do something that was previously incredible to even think about, that's just amazing to me. So that's how we're going to go into this weekend. I got a good weekend planned. I got some beach time, some barbecue, some bonfire, and I'm going to my first baseball game of the season. So I got some stuff on the agenda. I hope you do too. And thanks for sticking with me. This has been another week of the Morning Deuce. Hi to all you mothers out there. Happy Mother's Day this Sunday. And you'll hear from me again next week. This is D-Spin. I'm out. #trending.com.